Lenny Bruce was a revolutionary, boundary-pushing comedian known for his provocative social commentary. Despite being arrested 7 times while performing on stage, he was a leader of free speech for the comedy world, consistently critiqued social norms, corruption, systemic issues, and called out hypocrisy. He educated his audience through jokes on sex, race, religion, and free speech. The constant attacks on his art led to him overdosing at 40. Assagioli's theories help us understand Lenny Bruce on a deeper level. Some say he was an obscene drug addict that slowly lost his mind after years of fighting in court and being banned from comedy clubs. But Bruce was on a difficult spiritual journey. He was made a target for no other reason than his words were changing people, and the way he uses his personal pain, inner conflicts, and social critiques to channel a creative show that made his audience laugh and learn. There are many different pieces to Lenny Bruce's spiritual journey. I think we first must understand that he did have a sense of emotion intelligence. He had a very deep insight on human experience, and his morals and ethics were always rooted in universal truths of empathy, justice, compassion. He had to go a little bit into a heightened awareness state and go into flow state to be able to take his humor and use it to show the injustice and the hypocrisy in society and religion. And so we are seeing a spiritual journey of connecting to a higher self, to the collective, and going beyond the personal ego. But he also used a lot of drugs, especially heroin. So we are seeing that as like he did alter his state of consciousness, but he was never able to quite get through the self-destructive behaviors that his addictions had and his personal ego conflicts. He was arrested 7 times and constantly just attacked for what he said on stage. And that really led to a lot of conflicts within himself. We are taking the idea of psychokinesis, Assagioli's theoretical approach, and applying it to Bruce. So Assagioli talks about self-centered growth, which he's talking about the difference between a higher and personal self. He uses the term spiritual crisis, which perfectly describes Lenny Bruce, and he talks about being fueled by activism and creativity, but that it causes a lot of psychological distress. When we're talking about integration and synesis, Assagioli is talking about resolving lower unconscious conflicts. Personality needs to be harmonizes in the middle unconscious, and then transcend connection to the higher unconscious. Which, when we're looking at Bruce, he mostly resides in the middle unconscious. He did turn pain into universal insights. The will, which is the personal will versus the transpersonal will. We look at Lenny Bruce. He personally struggled a lot inside, but he was able to connect to a transpersonal higher will, where he challenged social norms, committed to truth and justice. And then when we're talking about conflicts and crisis in the psychokinesis, we're looking at challenges that are unresolved parts of ourselves and that need to be confronted with spiritual evolution. And Bruce really was limited and never truly self-actualized enough to resolve inner tensions and societal conflicts. To jump more into the spiritual crisis we were just talking about, Lenny Bruce through a lot of disorienting periods that led to awakenings, but he really struggled to stay authentic while battling the law and addictions. Another term used in psychokinesis is disidentification. And Assagioli talks about how we must separate ourselves from our immediate emotions, thoughts, and deeply connect to ourselves. And Bruce used comedy to invite everyone to step outside the conditioned mind. And he used humor as a transpersonal tool, but he was not able to separate himself from the emotions and thoughts when he was getting persecuted. Another, we talked about self-realization. Lenny Bruce was never really able to align himself with the values that he was talking about. He was never ever to fully integrate and resolve conflict in the lower unconscious. And we'll go more into that in just a second. And another one is peak experiences. So Bruce often went into the flow states like we talked about, and he had so much creative passion for comedy. And he really did go into that realm of transpersonal creativity that Assagioli talks about a lot, and was able to make connections and insights. So he did live a transpersonal life on the higher unconscious. And we're going to get more into all of this and break it more down. Okay, let's dive deeper into the idea of the unconscious. So our lower unconscious is the realm of fears, unresolved conflicts, emotional pain. When we're looking at Lenny Bruce, he was only ever able to partially integrate his pain. He did use it to transform in a creative, transpersonal, ethical way, but he was constantly suffering as he was becoming more and more self-aware and more socially aware too. He was never able to not be self-destructive. He was always limiting himself because of his addictions, and the legal battles he faced from the outside really reflected the internal struggles of his shadow. The middle unconscious, now this is the realm of creativity. This is where he lived, intellect, personality. He was a master of the middle unconscious. He used, like we talked about, he used his creative roles. He was a comedian. He mirrored and exposed the social issues and intellectually connected with audiences. And he was able to blend morality and humor. And he led to groundbreaking comedy. Comedy would not be what it is today. Movies wouldn't be what they are today. Even maybe some books wouldn't be what they are today without Lenny Bruce's contribution to standing up for free speech when it comes to art. The higher unconscious is around spiritual insight, inspiration, universal values, and honestly, Lenny Bruce was super connected to this. He was able to sacrifice his personal comfort while he was in jail because he spoke up for marginalized groups. He was authentically aligned with his higher self, unless you connect the big part of his addiction, which we can find in our lower conscious, would have kept him from reaching his full potential to his higher self, but he still was very connected to his higher self. Lenny Bruce had a mix of ascending, descending, and extending. Ascending is our spiritual growth, connection with higher self, and we've talked about he definitely was ascending past his egotistical concern. It was a great cost of him to it ended up costing him his life through addiction because of the struggles he faced speaking up for injustices. He was also descending because of all the inner conflicts, the inner shadows, the addiction, the legal battles. He was descending. His lower unconscious was never able to resolve some of that pain. He could only ever partially integrate, and there were times in the middle of his life, or in the middle of his comedy career, not his middle of his life, that he did seem to be getting a little better, and then he would get in a lot of trouble and it would just go downhill. And he also was extending. He had a very big impact on the interpersonal, relational, spiritual insight. He changed society. He extended his comedy beyond his ego and connected to others. His art was true activism, and his insights on these issues were ahead of his time and profound. He shifted the culture. Lenny Bruce used humor and connected to this flow state, which caused him to strengthen and develop his middle unconscious. And he was able to tap into this insight and really address taboo topics and bring awareness to the people he was talking about to. And he transcended and transpersonally developed while doing comedy because of this connection to flow state, but he was never able to work on the shadows that his addiction had on him. And there was a weakness because he was never fully grounded, and he was never fully connected to his higher self, because you can't fully connect to your higher self without fully resolving the lower unconscious. And he was so attacked by not being allowed to play in clubs, while facing legal battles, while not having enough money, that he quite literally lost it because he couldn't handle because he just couldn't handle things because he wasn't fully integrated and well grounded. Now, if Bruce would have known about Assagioli, Assagioli would have definitely told Bruce to visualize, imagine his ideal self. He would have been telling him to focus on self-care and learning the personal balance and like help him overcome his addiction and not completely burn himself out like he did. And he really would have been able to help him learn how to use this creative drive to also look at his self-destructive behaviors and not just the societal issues, and go deeper in the self-reflection, cultivate more awareness and mindfulness, which Lenny Bruce he was in survival mode, being attacked by the public because he was such a voice that he was unable to ever like completely integrate it. And we might never know if it was an accident or if he was given a bad batch of heroin, but he was never fully able to be fully what he could be. The only thing that Assagioli's theories really didn't talk about was, one, Bruce's spontaneity whenever he was on stage. The way he used his humor, the audience, it was very transpersonal, and he doesn't really get into the chaos side of transpersonal. Assagioli doesn't, where Bruce had a lot more chaos. He didn't have like structure in his life, and psychokinesis is more centered on self, while Bruce's work was very relational in a spiritual sense, and his identity was complete and utterly shaped in activism, and he had very little care about himself. I think he really was frustrated with the world.